join, but I've
Okay.
connected her with Joe and Penny by email. And I think she has a lot of connections who could help out. And also a friend of mine who's a professor at the University of Toronto who teaches in water management and other things. I've
Great.
connected her with Joe and Penny. So hopefully
Okay.
they'll join your circle.
Wonderful. All right. See who else is coming on. Hey, great to see you guys.
Hello, we decided we'd drop in on you. Penny
Yeah.
is about to have a bioregional educational experience as a big storm comes in that might show her what a Missouri tornado feels like, which never happened in January before, but yay, global warming. So, but it's good to be here with you.
Yeah, thank you so much for doing this. Not sure if what you're all seeing is just the.
Hi, Joe and Penny, it's Rita in Carbondale.
Hey, Rita. We have not talked with Hillary yet. We have been total slackers, but we're excited to talk to her.
Yes, I sent
Yeah,
you the,
we've been busy.
I sent you the link for today's meeting, so maybe she can jump in.
And Anna, we need
Yes.
to chat with you too, but that's another thing.
Yes. Well, hey, great to see everyone. Thank you all for joining. We'll get started in a couple of minutes.
Yay, Hillary.
Extraordinary. Yes. A wonderful gathering already and more to come. So I don't know if I need to stop my share again in order to relaunch it. Probably I do. So, hey, good to see you, Benji. And everyone, gosh, extraordinary. Thank you all for joining. We're going to follow a format that we have learned from Earth Regenerators. And Anna and I are going to co-facilitate this conversation. So the first thing that I wanted to do was just to put up our PowerPoint screen, and I'm going to try to do that. And which one? Oh, all right, let's try this one and see what we need to do to get it going. Slideshow. I don't know what I'm doing here. I'm not quite sure why it's not playing, but anyone who has any suggestions for how to get this actually running, play from start. There we go. All right. So just to make sure that you're in the right meeting and that we're not inviting people to something that they weren't expecting. But this is a first conversation with this group, and I want to thank you again for joining. And what I'm going to do is just move forward to a land acknowledgement. And then after that, we're going to invite everyone to introduce themselves. We'll have kind of a minute for each person to introduce themselves, but I'm going to go through this land acknowledgement first, because in doing some research on the background to this call, it became clear that approximately 120 bands of Native peoples have occupied this bioregion that we're talking about over the course of history. And where Victoria and I live, and you should know, for those of you who don't know, that Victoria and I are married and are co-founders of Possible Planet, which is the fiscal sponsor for Earth Regenerators, and Bioregional Activators, which are the groups that are really supporting this event. So where we live, currently known as Rochester, New York, is the ancestral and unceded territory of the Onondaga, or the people of the Great Hill. In English, they are known as Seneca, the keeper of the Western Door, and together with the Mohawk, Cayuga, Onondaga, Oneida, and Tuscarora, the Seneca make up the sovereign Haudenosaunee Confederacy, which many people probably have learned to call the Iroquois Confederacy, but Iroquois was kind of a slur word applied by the French. So Haudenosaunee is the real term for the nation, the Confederacy. We acknowledge that many of the indigenous peoples are still here today, actively working to preserve their languages and culture, as well as giving frontline protection to our planet. We vow to teach the living history of indigenous peoples accurately and appropriately to our children, and to work to end fictional colonial narratives on Turtle Island. As allies of all indigenous peoples, we take time to reflect on their strengths, resilience, and the many gifts that they have given us. In this acknowledgement, we hope to demonstrate respect for the treaties that were made on these territories and remorse for the harms and mistakes of the far and recent past. And we pledge to work toward partnership with a spirit of reconciliation and collaboration. We pay respects to the elders past and present. Please take a moment to consider the many legacies of violence, displacement, genocide, and migration that bring us together here today. And please join us in uncovering such truths at any and all public events. Thanks. And I'm gonna just come up. So what's on our agenda today? And it's basically these points. And so the first thing is framing the conversation, which is what we're really trying to do through the PowerPoint. And again, as I mentioned, Anna and I will be co-facilitating. So for those of you just joining, we just read through the land acknowledgement, and we're moving into a conversation. The first part of which is to get to know who's here and why. So what I'm going to do is stop the share and ask each of you to introduce yourself, taking about a minute to do so. And I'll probably ask Anna to start and then pass it along to other people. So if you wouldn't mind.
Yeah, hi, my name is Anna. I am from Buffalo, New York on Lake Erie, so also the Onondaga territory as well. I am coming to you not necessarily as a permaculture or regenerative practitioner, but a behavioral scientist practitioner. I work with children with autism. In my day job, I also am a pro-social facilitator. I do some public outreach for renewable energy projects. So I will be speaking to that portion of what Earth Regenerators does. I'm very passionate about the pro-social process, and I think that it's a great addition to bioregional framing and everything. So yeah, and I will pass it on to Brian.
Hello, everyone. Brian Poop. I'm with the Legacy Project, and we are working on the Greater Tkaronto bioregion, and working hard to welcome Penny and Joe to the Toronto area at the end of January for a week, which is going to be wonderful. We are on the north shore of Lake Ontario, right across the lake from Rochester, where Jonathan and Victoria are based. And Our bioregion is about 1.25 million hectares. And the backbone of the bioregion is a green belt, which surrounds the greater Toronto area. And obviously, we're part of the Great Lakes Basin. So I'll pass it along to Todd.
Thanks, Brian. Hey, everyone. My name is Todd Youngblood. I'm calling in from the Front Range of the Rocky Mountains, Denver metropolitan area, also the unceded territory of the Cheyenne, Ute, and Arapaho peoples. We're in kind of a high desert area, mile high city, right where the grasslands meet the Rocky Mountains. So I live up on one of the hills overlooking kind of the Front Range. I'm here as a collaborator within the Earth Regenerators Network. I work with Jonathan on some of the fundraising mechanisms, and I'm really interested in kind of the framework for a bioregional economy and what that could look like. Thank you much. I'm going to pass it to Benji.
Thank you, Todd. Good to see you here. And I'm Benji. I'm working pretty closely with Joe and Penny and the bioregional activators. Back at you, Joe. And also been holding space in what we call the bioregional catalyst for quite a while now in Earth Regenerators, just exploring with others the design pathway and what a bioregional future looks like, how we get there. I'm really excited that you're hosting this, Jonathan. I can already tell you put a lot of effort into organizing it. It's an experiment in what it's like for a bioregion to come together and how to prepare for these bioregional workshops and to just get the conversation going. So I feel like I have the opportunity to learn a lot today. And I just want to thank you for putting this together and for everybody showing up too. So I'll leave it at that. Hopefully that was under a minute or close. Jan, how about you?
Hey, everyone. Yeah, my name is Jan, and I'm coming to you from a, don't worry about it, Benji. My background's German. I live in the US. I live an hour north of New York City. I am a technologist, and I came to this whole thing through the crypto blockchain going climate movement, where people started looking at digital tooling for decentralized infrastructure to support the regenerative movement. I met Joe on the internet and Penny, and then in person in Colombia last year, it is now. And yeah, I'm currently concentrating on really mapping out the entire global ecosystem in terms of who is doing what and how many bioregions and people are there actually doing active work, which is supposed to be the beginning of a social graph, a social network. Yeah, that's where I'm really concentrating on technology-wise in creating something like an app that we could use to map out the space and have an understanding of how large and diverse this group is. And I'll leave it at that. I'll pass it on to chat.
Okay, hello. I'm just jumping on here. I guess we're doing a check-in. Yeah, so I am in Southeast Michigan. I'm in Ann Arbor, about half an hour, 40 minutes from Detroit. I have been involved with some more locally oriented projects having to do with the commons and in various community restoration projects, but have been wondering how to connect that with ER. So I'm very excited to see that happening here, and yeah, and just looking forward to the conversation, see if we can fit that in. I'm not sure who else has gone yet.
Well, why don't we go to Jan Inglis? I think Benji was trying to get to go before.
Thank you. So I'm calling from the unceded Sinex territory of the Upper Columbia Kootenai bioregion, which is in the interior of British Columbia, and the town nearby is Nelson. And so I'm a long way from the Great Lakes, but I was extensively involved in a gathering regarding Great Lakes bioregion and the Great Lakes Commons quite a few years ago. And the complexities of gathering the many very active Indigenous people from that large area. So huge bioregion, one of the most significant bioregions and one of the most damaged bioregions in North America. And so many cities, so many countries, so many states and provinces, all are around there. So we did a lot of work regarding developing a social charter of the commons, of how to take the concerns and the caretaking of the commons going forth, as well as a lot regarding understanding economic flows in a different way, and coming up with a concept of the commons trust and commons banking, and ways that the understanding of the resources could be looked at with outside of the usual system of financing. So very interested in this, another layer of gathering regarding it. And I will have to leave at the hour though, so because I've got something else on. I will pass to Preston.
Thanks, Jan. My name is Preston Wahlberg, and similar to Brian Papa, I am coming from the North Shores of Toronto. I'm not going to get into too much of the long history there because, yeah, terrestrial are the traditional territories of many different nations. I'm coming in as a generalist among a lot of specialists, and I've been following Joe for a few years now, and very excited by the whole framework that he has been pilot projecting down in Barashara. And so I'm here to listen and to be a part of the journey and see how it begins to play itself out among the rest of you, and looking forward to it. And I'll pass off to Kimberly.
Thank you. My name's Kim, and I'm near the Great Lake Erie, in a city of Strongsville, Ohio. I work at Case Western Reserve University in Cleveland, and I'm here. JR and I had a conversation, exchange on the topic of a bioregion in where I live came up, and he introduced me to Anna, who is co-hosting here. I have been on the Earth Regenerators site for about a year, but haven't really engaged very much, except to read a lot of useful items. And I recently attended the Bioregional Regeneration Summit, and see some of you here who are there. So I'm very curious about what's happening in the Great Lakes area. Thank you. And I'll pass it to JR. RJ, my brother's name is RJ. Sorry, JR, RJ. Gosh.
Thank you, Kim. Yes, nice to see you, and Anna and everybody else. Here in northeastern Pennsylvania, Lenape lands, and we call it Appalachian Edge, or the edge of the Appalachians. But I'm here because of the years that I spent in the Buffalo area, Onondaga and Seneca tribes, and that whole area of what we call sometimes Western New York, and saw Lake Erie in the 60s and 70s, spent a lot of time on the shores and saw the conditions of the lake back then. And so I'm very interested in this bioregion. Also Toronto, Lake Ontario, gosh, what an area. So I'll pass it on to Joe and Penny, I think.
I'll go first as Kenny gets accustomed to the cracking sounds of thunder that make houses shake and the walls of water that come in a Missouri rainstorm. Even on January 2nd, we get possibility of tornadoes now. Thank you, global warming. Yeah, I think what I want to say is that one part of the sadness for me of coming to Missouri was that we couldn't go to my favorite cave, which is called Onondaga. And instead we had to go to Merrimack Caverns. But we've been here in Missouri for the last few days, giving Penny a proper education in the cave state. And we visited 2 major springs today, and one of the United States' first and oldest fish hatchery for protecting the river trout in the rivers of most of the central part of the United States. And so she's getting a proper exposure to the hidden secrets of Missouri. And I have a feeling that as we prepare to join Brian and Susan in Toronto, and get to hang out with Preston and a lot of other people, and then we figure out how we can journey into upstate New York and hang out with Anna and Jonathan and Victoria and whoever else may want to join us, that these kinds of exchanges are going to be so important. And one thing I just want to name as a conversation, an anchor for the conversation, is we've already booked our airline tickets to arrive in Toronto on January 29th and depart on February 12th, which means we've already set aside a week to be in New York, whether New York is ready for us or not. We talked to Jonathan about this already. So we hope this conversation is a warm-up for some of you to make the journey to wherever we'll be in New York. If those of you are in Pennsylvania and other nearby places, Michigan, or wherever you may be, hint, hint, and come and join us there, because I have a feeling something really important is going to happen. And that's awesome. Pass it to you.
Hi, everybody. This is exciting to see you all here, and really looking forward to visiting Toronto and New York. And my uncle actually lives right near where Jonathan lives, actually lives in Rochester and has a cabin about 45 minutes away. And so I've been there. I love that area. And I'm really excited to hear you're a pro-social facilitator. That's where my love is, as well as with like trauma healing. And so I'm excited to bring that as I'm coming to these areas, and it's so good to see so many people here. Yeah.
Just want to say one more thing before we pass it on is, for some weird reason, when I woke up early yesterday morning, I started writing a book, and I've already written the first 3 chapters. And so the book that comes after the design pathway is writing itself, and is going to be shaped profoundly by these visits. So just naming something's in the ether. And it's burgeoning forth. So we're excited to be here in the conversation with you all. Would you like to pick the next person?
I will pick, I can't see their names. Oh, Susan?
You're muted, you know.
Right, the mute button. Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
All right. Thanks for letting me join in and listen. I am very new to all of this. I think it's fantastic that there are people that are doing and caring about and working toward these sorts of things. I come from I'm a mechanical engineer by trade, but because of various life circumstances, I have become supremely interested in organic gardening, healthy food production, real food production, and then sort of kind of, regenerative farming. I'm not a farmer yet, but I really want to connect people to good sources of food, and I mean the earth needs some help because we've damaged it a lot. So I appreciate you letting me listen, and maybe at some point I can be useful and contributory. Am I supposed to pass it off to someone else? I'm not sure. I came in a little late because of work.
How about Victoria?
Yeah, and Susan came to this after, we'd known each other for a while, and she's in Pittsburgh, if you hadn't said so, it must be in the Basin here. Don't know much geography, but Jonathan and I are married, and he's always, years ahead of me. This is one of those things. I wasn't interested to start, as it always starts. And then he told me that the bioregion that we're looking at is all of the Great Lakes. And it just startled me because I never would have thought that. And yet, the ideas just started coming because in the indigenous cultures, they probably knew that and traveled the whole length of these things. It just never even occurred to me. So I'm pretty excited about how this is a bioregion. And how about Claire?
Thanks, Victoria. Yeah, great to be here. I'm in Canada on the complete opposite side of the country, in southern Vancouver Island. I'm working in both Victoria, which is home of the Lekwungen speaking people, and I'm also working in the Cowichan bioregion, which is home of the Cowichan and the Haudenosaunee. And I'm really just so interested in what is happening in the Great Lakes area. Brian and I and Susan have had conversations, and just the entire process has been just happy that we're even having these conversations and getting into some of the details. So I am wondering, has Rita gone?
Not yet.
Yeah, well, Hillary.
This is Rita, and I'm calling in from Western Colorado, land of Nooch people, the Ute people, and on the hot track for bioregion here in the Roaring Fork Valley watershed, but also very interested in what's happening in the Toronto area, the Great Lakes area, because I'm originally from Muskoka, Ontario. And so I'm listening in with great interest. And I pass to Hillary.
Hillary, if you're there, muted, you want to unmute? And
all right, there we are.
Great.
Have I unmuted now?
Yes, you are. Thank you so much.
Great. Thank you. Sorry, my flipping around here. My name is Hillary Van Welter. I am in the same watershed as Brian. I am in the traditional lands of the Wendat and Anishinaabe and many like that in Newmarket, Ontario, which is just north of Markham. I am I'm very interested in being here because I've been working in this field for 18 years on Lake Simcoe, in the Lake Simcoe watershed. And we did what is now called regenerative. We didn't call it that 18 years ago, but that's what we were doing. And so I'm a systems change lover, and some people call me a futurist. I always seem to be at the edge of things. And so my passion is, given that all the experiences that we had in the all of the Lake Simcoe watershed work we did for 15 years, we were also linked into other projects as part of the Great Lakes, and we were always the wild child. We were always out there doing things that nobody would talk about, nobody would do, and we got better results than everybody, but we did it in a fundamentally different way. And so my interest is on the edge of regeneration. Where is it going? Not where it's been. That's my love. And I think I can't really see.
Um,
Somebody's going to have to pass for me.
I think Steve.
Okay, hi. Sorry to come in a little late. I'm on the East Coast in New Jersey, but I'm interested in listening in because I run a meetup called Toward Fostering Bioregionalism. And so I like to disseminate any news that's happening around the country along those lines. Hi, and I'll just be listening in. I can't see anybody and I was late. So Jonathan, I'm not sure who to pass to.
Shane?
Hey, Charlene. I think I'm the last one. I could be wrong, but well, apart from yourself, but yeah, I really I've missed you folks. I've been coming and going for a year and a half, maybe. And I wanted to say how interested I am to be looking at the Great Lakes bioregion, but I find it really kind of overwhelming because there's 37 million people that call this watershed home. And I grew up on Lake Huron. I now live in Kitchener, about an hour west of Ontario, of Toronto. And I was visiting Mom yesterday, and I came home in a fairly substantial melt, which felt an awful lot like spring on New Year's Day, and crossed the waters of the South Penetangor River and the North Pine River and an arm of the Teeswater River and a few arms of the mighty Maitland River, and now I'm home on the Grand. And I like to look at these little rivers because it does break up that mass of the Great Lakes watershed, which is just, again, so huge. And it's obviously kind of difficult to move masses of people, but maybe when I look at, the creeks and streams that I grew up around, yeah, it's a little easier to see the life there. So thanks. Nice to see y'all.
Great. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for being here. It's really interesting to me that we have a diversity of folks from all over. We invited some local people, and I don't know, who are not associated with Earth Regenerators or some of the other networks that we're part of. And we hope to engage them as we go along. That includes folks who are responsible for dealing with the pollution involved in the lakes, and folks who are part of the original Commons group that Jan was speaking about. So, this is just the beginning of what could potentially become, kind of a tsunami of interest in this kind of work. So I'm just going to go back for a moment to our PowerPoint here and share some part of how we got here. It's really a lot to do with the fact that Joe and Penny are, traveling and have the opportunity to come here and really help us rebirth bioregionalism in this region. What we learned from speaking to the folks that Jan had worked with a dozen years ago was that they had, done quite a lot to bring together a sense of the commons, but there was currently, not much energy to pursue it. So in effect, we're hoping that this will provide some new energy. And the background to this involves the work of Earth Regenerators. And for those of you not familiar with it, I would urge you to check out the network. And the new portion of the network, Bioregional Activators. And some of the work that is built around the 4 values model of common land, and definitely around the rebirth of bioregionalism as a vision and as a philosophy. So let me see if I can go further. Oops. So our approach, and I just want to share this with you briefly, and then I'm going to turn it over to Anna to talk about the pro-social aspect of this. For those of you, again, not familiar with pro-social, it's a growing movement, and perhaps Joe will speak a little more about this, but certainly Anna will speak to it. And we're also talking about a perspective that is post-collapse. There's this great line that things are, it's far too late and things are far too bad for us to be pessimistic. So, we thought we'd steal a little slogan there, make our planet great again. And the bioregional vision is the kind of vision that's expressed by Kirkpatrick Sale in Dwellers in the Land. And if those of you who haven't read it, it's well worth it. It's amazing how some of these books that are, I can't even remember how old it is, but they are truly up to date when you look at them today. So
1985.
1985. Well, there you go. All right. So Anna, I'm going to ask you to walk through this for folks and tell us about pro-social.
Yeah, so pro-social is this framework that incorporates several different disciplines, including contextual behavioral science, evolutionary theory, anthropology, behavioral economics. And so I'm kind of going to be presenting it in 2 parts. This is the contextual behavioral science portion. So, and it's basically a way of looking at how to collaborate within groups. So it's important to be mindful of individual components. For example, within yourself, you have individual thoughts and feelings. Within a group, you have individual members, and within groups of groups, you have individual groups. So you do want to be mindful of those individuals, but at the same time, holding that very lightly, while also still focusing on the overall value of the whole. So when you look at the individual person, I love this visual. I pulled this from the pro-social book. I think it explains it really well. Where if you as an individual only focus on individual thoughts and feelings, that can take away from your whole experience. It can really get you stuck inside of your head and prevent you from experiencing the present moment and being able to fully experience all of your emotions. Same thing with individual groups. If you focus too much on the individual self, you'll miss out on celebrating the values of the whole. And within groups of groups, one group that can be too involved with itself or only put its own needs first can end up creating a kind of tribal arguments between groups so that they aren't looking out for the good of the whole. So it's really important to keep in mind in the pro-social framework that yes, you do want to be mindful of individuals so you don't disenfranchise them, but ultimately we want to be hold that lightly and still continue to work towards the values and the good of the group. And you can go to the next one.
Right.
So
let me speak to this very briefly. This is a framework that comes from Ted Rao, who's involved with sociocracy. Some of you, again, may be familiar with it as a methodology. But essentially, he's saying that for a group to cohere and be reasonably successful, it needs to go through several steps, including a commitment to consent, to speaking in turns, to be clear about the group's objectives, get to know each other, and formally start the circle. So we're not quite there yet, but we're on this road. And then once we have achieved a level of identification with the purposes of the group, we can then begin to build an infrastructure, decide what to do, invite new members, and then move on to working together, reviewing, reflecting, and improving. And so that's the end. Basically, the pro-social framework, and again, Anna, you might speak a little more to this, is based on the core design principles of Elinor Ostrom's approach to how the commons are successfully managed. And for those of you who don't know her story, you should really take some time to look it up because it's quite inspiring and it's quite challenging to conventional economists. You want to say a little about this, Anna?
Yes, was muted. So it does work very well with this sociocracy framework as well. And it's basically keeping in mind that that nested level that I showed you before, where there's an individual as part of a group as part of a larger groups. This is Elinor Ostrom, by the way. And keeping in mind that what is most adaptive for the individual may not be adaptive for the group. Most adaptive groups are very collaborative. So Elinor Ostrom actually won a Nobel Prize in economics through her 8 principles that she noticed that all successful and sustainable communities shared. There's these 8 principles that she noticed that effective groups, sustainable groups of people, either in communities. This can also be applied in organizations and volunteering groups, even in family units, that with these 8 principles, you tend to have a very collaborative and sustainable group. And that's having a shared identity and purpose, equitable distribution of contribution and benefits, fair and inclusive decision-making, transparency between members and knowing what each team member is responsible for, as well as what they are currently doing, consequences for helpful or unhelpful behaviors, fair and fast conflict resolution, authority to self-govern, and collaboration with other groups. So in the combination with the mindfulness and values-based action, that's what pro-social is.
Great, wonderful. So now we have a number of resources, which I'm just going to kind of refer to here briefly. Basically, I embedded a 10-minute video introduction from Joe Brewer, and I will try and find the links and put them in the chat. Certainly send them out to you later. Plus a much more in-depth discussion of the 4 returns model by Benji Ross, and also list some papers that we've come across that are interest if folks want to get serious about looking at this as a bioregion, including the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative funding that's available from the Environmental Protection Agency, a magazine that's put out by a really unusual, interesting person, Roy Allen, and also the Council of the Great Lakes Region, and Mark Fisher was someone else that we invited and will continue to invite to participate, and numerous other contacts and materials. So we have a real sense of being able to put this together. I'm gonna, and I can do this. Wants to. Okay, here we go. So, and this is directly from the Great Lakes Commons document. And it really is something that we can stand on the shoulders of to build a thriving bioregion and to recognize and restore our relationship to the water, to the land and to the peoples who have inhabited this for so many centuries and have taken care of this up until the present day, when many of us still seek to do this kind of stewardship, but recognize that our American consumer civilization has brought a lot of harm to the region. So these are some of the kinds of principles. And here's the critical question I'm going to leave us with and turn to opening up the conversation, which is there enough interest and enough commitment to attend future meetings and expand into a discussion of a bioregional learning center or ecoversity? So that's the presentation, and I would just like you to put your hand up if you'd like to speak. Questions, comments, thoughts about where we go from here? Steve.
With projects like you're proposing, which is extremely important and valuable. There's a funny thing you can see if you look at other such projects, until things reach a critical mass, which can be, a while. It usually takes one or two or three or a small group of burning souls. For example, if you look at one project like you're proposing, that's pretty far, relatively far advanced, which is the Cascadia bioregion. They call themselves the Department of Bioregion. So they have a certain infrastructure. They have the website, of course, and they just launched a great, talking about publications, they just launched a great magazine called The Spoke, which is for the Cascadia bioregion. But you'll notice if you look at that project, or if you look at like particular eco-village projects, it usually takes a couple, sometimes even one really burning soul who really pays a lot of attention to it. So, it would be, I hope very much that what you're proposing gets off the ground. And I am encouraged that it could, but you need to find, usually you need to find those few burning souls who really care, focus on this particular project. Over.
Absolutely, that's the case. And so really part of what we're doing here is looking for those folks who are willing to step up and put their heart and soul into this and make it work. Victoria?
I don't really know what constitutes a bioregion, although I've thought some possibilities of what it is. Can somebody talk about why it's important to see that whole basin, which encompasses several states and climate zones and, countries, why it's essential that at some point somebody does take this on, because it really isn't, if it's not treated that way, there will be trouble. And what we're looking to do is regenerate the world. So I think Joe might be the best person to talk about it. I'd love to hear Joe on this.
Yeah, I would just like to jump in and say that one of the things about not only the Great Lakes, but the, 20,000 lakes that are north of Lake Ontario, or whatever the number is, it's about 20% of the world's freshwater. And so that alone should be enough to give us pause. The boreal forest to the north in northern Canada is the largest forest on Earth, and is going to be profoundly impacted by climate change, because the Arctic Circle will have about 5 times the amount of temperature change relative to the tropics for average temperature increase of the planetary atmosphere. So the consequences are going to be of utter and absolute dire seriousness. But there's another reason, which is that if you look back at the Haudenosaunee peoples and the Iroquois nation, what is the larger Algonquin language family, which encompasses many tribes, is that they had multiple thousands of years of extended trade across this region. And it was a self-organizing pattern of politics and economics. And so if we want to have anything that can ever attempt to be sustainable for this part of the planet in the kind of upper eastern regions of North America, they're going to have to figure out how to reintroduce those patterns, which are all bioregional, all of them. And that's without going into a phenomenon that Earth system scientists call teleconnections, which is that changes in the Earth system in one place can have indirect causal linkages through different kinds of processes to affect other regions, such as the El Nino, La Nina of the Pacific Ocean changing the precipitation in South America, where patterns can span several thousand miles. That one of the most important aspects of the weather for North America, and I don't know how many of you know this, North America is the only continent on Earth that is relatively equal in width and height, east-west to north-south, with two major mountain ranges that run south to north. So the Sierras and the Cascades on the west, and you got the Rockies, which adds another version, and then Appalachia. And what that creates is the distinctive four-season pattern of the North American continent, which doesn't exist anywhere else on Earth. So those of us in the US and Canada talk about our four seasons as though they're typical. They're actually exceptional. And they produce some of the most important freshwater biodiversity on Earth, which is all of the river systems of the North American continent. So there's this very serious need to cultivate planetary scale knowledge. I actually wrote a chapter this morning in my new book that is just forming on the need to understand Earth system science and how to integrate hundreds of research fields to be able to understand the dynamic Earth for exactly this kind of a reason. That if everyone was trained in Earth system science, we wouldn't have to ask why the Great Lakes are important because we would see all of these connections. And so that's an element of this. And I think that the size of the population centers and the strengths of the economies of kind of the greater New England, Great Lakes, and into Canada are going to experience huge shocks and disruption with the collapse processes that are coming. And so they're going to be utterly devastated. And they're going to deeply, deeply need people who are rooted to place to anchor and survive that storm for possibly up to 200 years, multiple generations of humans. So developing a deep foundation in bioregionalism in this region will be of the utmost importance for the survival of peoples in one of the most concentrated areas of freshwater on Earth. So I hope that starts to give some context. I'm sure some of you local folks like Brian, who have been looking at this for a while, can add more texture and richness to that, but I like dropping F-bombs when it's important. I just say, it's a big fucking deal. This is extremely important.
Well,
So,
and what would be also helpful, because I know that people take the smaller regions, like how are the smaller regions related to the bigger? What do you do if you have a gap in that? And what do you do if you have a gap somewhere, or you're going to have a lot of gaps in the beginning? So.
Yeah, and I'll pass it to Claire, but I'll just say very similar organizational and coordination challenges will exist for the Salish Sea. So just naming that as well. I hope that helps.
Great, Claire.
Yeah, I just wanted to, in response to what Steve had brought up, but it really occurs to me that language sometimes really gets in the way. When we're not specifically talking about bioregionalism, I noticed that people were actually really having those bioregional conversations. They didn't understand that they fitted into this conversation that could help bring a greater level of coherence to what they were doing in a more connected way. But they were doing incredible work. It's just the framing needs to be there. And that's where I think the bioregional conversation can really help. So just Yeah, and so I'm specifically thinking about people doing work in the Great Lakes area that may not be using the language that says specifically bioregional, but they are doing the bioregional work. It's just finding them and yeah, making sure that they understand that the conversation is going on. Yeah, so just wanted to say, I think there's a lot more going on than we give credit to, and it's exciting that these conversations can help pull them together, but we need to also be reaching out.
Right, and one of the important aspects of this bioregion is that it looks like it's going to become a climate refuge. We are blessed with not only the 20% of the world's fresh water, but also remarkable protection from hurricanes and forest fires and other kinds of, disasters, and really quite lucky here, especially we just went through this enormous storm. Rochester had less than an inch of snow while Buffalo got 4 feet. So there's a lot of variability here, but it's a variability that's really powerful and supportive. Anna?
Yeah, I just wanted to mention that if anybody is having questions about how exactly would we do, kind of look at it, this is a very big area with many people. I do think that the Great Lakes Commons, if you go to their website, they all met, and Jan, I know that you attended their conference in 2012. This was before Earth Regenerators existed, where we have this amazing technology to connect people, and people were connecting back then. It was a pretty big conference. They pulled from Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, local conservation groups, local public officials. So I do believe that the interest and the ability to have this reach is there. I think that we can also look to the Great Lake Commons, and there are still some people who are somewhat involved in bioregionalism in those groups. I know that from talking to one of the board members, it's died out a little bit, but there's also those connections as well that I'm sure can be reignited if there is enough interest from us to start bringing it back.
Great. Brian?
Yes, in working on the Greater Tkaronto bioregion, we thought very carefully about how you define a bioregion, looking at the history, the historical indigenous patterns, the land, the watersheds, the current cultural patterns, and so on. And we ended up with this region that covers a wide area, I think 65 different watersheds, and over 10 million people, 1.25 million hectares. And it's in and of itself, it's a huge area. There's a lot of organizations, there's a lot of work being done already. So to go any bigger would be utterly overwhelming in terms of knitting together and doing the weaving work that you need to do in a bioregion to make it successful. So that's why I think it's probably important for us to define different local bioregions around the Great Lakes. But there's definitely is a place for this larger network. So I've always seen the Great Lakes Basin as a network of smaller bioregions that make up the Great Lakes Basin. And because of the importance of the Great Lakes Basin, as Joe had pointed out. For example, if you look at the local forests and wildlife and climate, there's a really big difference between north of Lake Ontario around the Toronto area to north of Lake Superior. We are not in the boreal forest down here yet. The boreal forest is farther north, but north of Lake Superior is all boreal forest, and the climate is very different. We have a lot of what they call number one farmland in Ontario in terms of the soil around the Greater Toronto Area, where that does not exist north of Lake Huron, north of Superior. So that's how we were conceptualizing things.
And just before we go to Hillary, I just wanted to add that having looked at this for the last couple of years, I am convinced that it's not a matter of where we draw the boundaries so much as it is about our understanding of the biology and the ecology of the regions that we inhabit. And so the bioregional vision is one that can inform our work, whether we're focused on just a narrow slice of an urban area, or whether we're focused on a much larger dimension. And it's worth understanding that the water in Lake Ontario is water that comes all the way through the Great Lakes, and that the Indigenous folks were able to navigate these successfully. So there's a coherence there. And at the same time, we need to absolutely focus in on the individual challenges of particular regions and make sure that we are A, understanding them, and B, nurturing them back to some level of health. And Hillary?
Yes, thank you. I just want to comment on a couple of things, and one is the opportunity to also recognize the diversity of people, and not just the ecosystem diversity, but also the fact that these various bioregions are very rich with unique people. And that the integration of the people and the land, the people and the water, we are nature. So I think that sometimes we forget that important part of looking at the human dynamic and the amazing talents and abilities that many people are looking of how do they apply their talents and uniquenesses in a world that's going upside down. And I think active work in working in bioregions in a way that really accentuates the talent of people that are moved and motivated by the land and the water, by the ecology in which they live. You know, and for me, regeneration is all about the well-being of all. So how do we mobilize with recognizing, again, the opportunities for people to flourish in unlocking their potential, unlocking their abilities, at the same time that we're utilizing that to be able for the waters and the ecology to be able to come back into its right relationship.
Thank you so much. Victoria? Gotta unmute.
That was really brilliant, Hillary. I love what you said. And when you spoke, my brain just had a picture of a thriving multi-generational culture that's playing the game, you know, like we're the indigenous of the Great Lakes Basin. And do you know what they used to do? And you know, collapse sounds scary, but if you're working toward reinventing a whole new culture based on the Great Lakes Basin, if you're young and you want to travel, you know, having all these different climate zones and different topographies and stuff, you know, you could spend a lifetime around the Great Lakes and be happy, you know, even if you never get on a plane and go and visit those, you know, places in Europe, that we could develop an economy as a preventive measure or a getting used to the fact that someday we'll be back to the bioregional basin. Just, you know, it'll just be the natural thing. Nothing else will make sense. And if we are smart about it and plan it, it could be such an engaging opportunity for people of all ages and interests to play this game of what could we look like if we only had ourselves to depend on and all the other, supply chains were off. How would we organize ourselves? And guess what? Native Americans did this. So it's possible. So I just think that, that would be an amazing game. People would learn so much. I'd learn so much.
Right. Sorry. So what I wanted to say about this is that very few of us actually understand the relationships of the water and the land and the people and how it's been managed and what things have been done that were nurturing and what things have been done that were harmful. This is not what kids learn in school these days. And this is where we need to go if we're going to make a difference to our own survival and the survival of other species on the planet, given the kinds of realities that we face, the fact that we have exceeded 7 out of the 9 planetary boundaries, and that's not going to turn around tomorrow. We have to live with the reality that these things are in motion and address the things that we can address to reduce the pollution and the emissions and the damage that we're doing. We have to stop digging the hole deeper and begin to restore the land. And so our organization has basically evolved towards doing 2 things. One is decarbonizing the built environment that we've created, and the other is recarbonizing the soils that we have so badly treated. I guess one of the things that really has animated me over the past year and a half that has to do with how what I call lawn replacement therapy, which I've been practicing on myself, is that we used to, when I was growing up, we used to look at these huge green areas and think, God, how wonderful, how beautiful this is, how wonderful and green. Now I look at the expanses of lawn and I think, what a waste of biodiversity. How can we allow this kind of aesthetic and everything that goes with it? Pesticides, herbicides, gasoline-driven lawnmowers and leaf blowers. We've actually trashed a huge portion of the land. And if we're going to get back to, something like 30 by 30 or half the planet, being restored to health, we're going to have to really shift the way that we see things and start tearing up the lawns, start tearing up some of the pavement and bringing nature back into our lives in a very close way. Joe and Penny?
I really just wanted to bring a question forward because something that Penny and I have been feeling, I'd say Benji, Penny and I have been feeling because we've been in such a dance around it, is that as we have been invited into different communities, like when we went to Paonia and we went to Carbondale, and we can feel it emerging as we're preparing to go to Toronto, that there is an energy to, one thing is outside eyes seeing the local place in a way that the locals have a hard time seeing themselves, but that the locals really love, meaning they have someone affirm what they already love, which is really a big deal. And then the other thing is learning exchanges between places, like the way that Benji has been holding with Bioregional Catalyst, been holding these conversations for people from different territories to talk with each other. And just getting to know each other is a big deal, let alone all of the other ways that they can learn. And so the question that I'm sitting with comes in sort of 2 levels. One level is, what is the earth asking asking of us as humans in this moment that provoked Penny and me to go on this crazy adventure of traveling all over the damn world. Like, what the hell is that? You know, the world seems to be calling for this in a very, very strong way. Like, we are in the last moments of possibility for setting in place the kinds of relationships that will be needed, because the relationships take time to build. And so there's this thing is, what is it about this planetary moment? And then specifically, what is it that the landscape is asking that was first articulated by Brian and Susan to Penny and me? Would you come to Toronto? And then stirred the thinking and the feelings of Jonathan and Victoria to ask, maybe we should have a conversation about, you know, the Finger Lakes area, Rochester, Buffalo, maybe the Great Lakes. And then all of you are here on this call feeling this question that isn't coming from a human. It's a question that's coming from the land itself. And so what I'm wondering is, how can the land invite whatever might emerge as a conversation? Because we have some people, you know, Penny and I are coming, and our offering is very simple. We only go where we're invited. We don't ask for money. We refuse to sell anything. We are anti-market. We are not coming as capitalists trying to sell our knowledge and services. We only go where we're genuinely asked to go. And then we go there in service to what that place is asking of us. And so the question I have is, what are these places asking? And not just of Penny and me. We just happen to be sort of like a signal of something, because it's very concrete. Here are some people who will come and hold talks and give workshops and do whatever's asked. But what is being asked? And I think that's the real question here, because it's not just that it's being asked. Notice Jonathan and Anna are both being very mindful in holding the agenda of today's conversation to really ask, why are you all here? You know, what brought you here? What is being asked of you that you answered? What is being asked of the Great Lakes? And I can feel strongly that the Great Lakes is asking something of her humans. I don't know what it is. I'm not from there. We were just in the Chicago area, and just right on the edge of Lake Michigan. And so we were touching the Great Lakes last week. We'll be there again for a day later this week. And we feel the land calling for something. And so that's the question that I wanted to just place here and see what emerges.
Yeah, that's really wonderful. RJ?
Just one little piece I wanted to interject is, as we've said, 20% of the world's fresh water. The lakes themselves are each so different in terrain and depth, and the flow from the one end, from the west, all the way into the St. Lawrence and out to the ocean, just carries everything along with it. And each lake, each water area, which we see the surface, each water area is so different. I think Lake Erie is just 100 feet, 150 feet deep at the deepest point. So, and yet the whole area has been traversed. So I think that's actually part of the conversation, because we live along the edge of the lakes and we see the streams and the watersheds that run into it. So I just wanted to add that. It's fascinating, and it is a difference as we traverse the lakes and the areas and the shores around them. And also so glaciated in certain areas that you can dig down six inches and hit bedrock. You know, it's just so different than south of there. Just to add that thought.
Jan?
Yeah, I don't have obviously the perfect answer for Joe, what the region, what the lakes are asking for, but I'm trying to find out in my head sort of where the where the catalyst lies, right? To go beyond, to scale a movement, to reach people on the ground. And while the Great Lakes bioregion or very large bioregions make sense to look at as the big goal, people connect on a much smaller level. So that's what I'm trying to, I think, point out is the regional context. And what RJ just said is, because I live on the waterfront, I know what the tributaries are in my area where water runs in, and I might care what the health of the water is that comes in there. So it's just something I felt like I should point out is the identity, the context for people to find identity needs to be right. And I think, for example, Cascadia, even though it's a very large bioregion, has done a fantastic job with having a presence, whether it's, I think they even have an online magazine, they have events. It allows people to discover their place. And organizationally, the Great Lakes bioregion could be the top of some larger structure. But for people to discover and express an interest, I would go to a local meeting. I would want to learn about something. The context, I think, is much smaller and much a much smaller eco-region or whatever that is called on that level, for people to connect with and say, I care. Because if we, unfortunately, what we've learned, most of the people, when you say, are you not a citizen of this planet? That's too large for people to somehow connect with, even though they don't deny it, but they don't become active just because they live on this planet, it seems. That's sort of what conclusion on my side is. So that breaking down and to go into like what is going on around the Great Lakes, to point to where already things or activities happen that we would count as part of the bioregional or regenerative movement. That's a lot what I'm thinking about, is to tease that out and to show it to people and say, look, there is already stuff, and it would maybe give an option to all of these 16-year-olds that are in the streets, because they are looking for activity. They know what their future looks like, and it's not, they feel that it's, I don't want to go to university because that would be studying for a world that you're telling me is not going to exist, but they don't know what else to do. So anyways, this is the whole topic, right, is to find the right size for people to find their identity in a place. And that doesn't mean that it's bad to talk about the Great Lakes bioregion, but I think that is too high of a level for people to say, oh, I identify with that.
Okay, well, thank you. Anna?
Yeah, so I did put in the chat a link to the Milwaukee Water Commons. It is a group that was developed by a board member of the Great Lakes Commons who she lived in Milwaukee, and it's a great conservation-based organization, but really more based in, I think, community development and really developing a commons within a city. So they have a lot of community initiatives. They selected their initiatives based on polling that they did throughout the city over the course of a year to identify what's most meaningful to their community. They also they set up water festivals. They invoke a lot of Indigenous heritage into it as well to try. Their purpose is to get people to connect with water. They even do things like teaching inner city children how to swim, because so many people couldn't even connect with water in that way. So in my mind, I think something like this in individual cities and towns would be a great way to start connecting people to the water, and using some of the strategies that they have used to develop a water city is what they're trying to become, as a model water city. I think that would be a wonderful way to to focus on that. And they did start off as a very small nonprofit group, not a lot of funding, and they clearly have quite a bit of funding now. I did reach out to them hoping that we could potentially get them involved in this group. But I think due to the holidays, I haven't heard back from them, but maybe a group like this would be a perfect example, I think, of what you were talking about, Jan.
If you have any links to that, I'm gobbling up any information and collecting huge amounts of lists of links to all these local projects. That's what I'm actually. So anything you can throw out at me, I would love to add to my little collection. Thank you.
Yeah, I just put it in there again.
And, and I wanted to mention that this is really a fundamental starting point for any kind of bioregional work, is for us to identify the regenerative projects that are already taking place in many parts of the region. And part of my interest in approaching it at the larger scale is just seeing that there are enough compatible and mutually supportive initiatives that we can bring together to have a powerful impact in each of the different regions. Steve?
Yeah, what you're right, and about that, and also what Jan is bringing up, is essentially the question of appropriate scale, and I fully agree with Jan. I mean, in terms of thinking in terms of identification and commitment and involvement, the planetary scale, we all want to be cognizant of that, but that's not the scale where you're going to get people committing and being involved. And then Jan said people are likely to get involved at a much more local level. And I can see that. I think that if we're thinking in terms of social change towards a whole different society, a whole different organization of society, away from these crazy two large nation states that make no sense in our world, and we want to move towards a bioregional world, then one thing about scale at maybe a sort of macro level is to think about what's a viable economy. See, so within Cascadia, you can have a whole viable economy, and you can kind of minimize, Victoria was talking about the supply chains, you want to kind of minimize that kind of thing. And so even though people would tend to get involved at a very local level, if they have a conception of an ultimate world where the Great Lakes bioregion constitutes a viable economy overall, then that can make sense too to people as an umbrella concept within which they do their organizing and identifying and making a commitment. Over.
Thanks. Kimberly?
Yeah, thank you. And I want to thank Joe for offering that question as to why we're here and what is Mother Earth saying to us, because that is part of why I'm here. That's part of an inquiry I've been in for a couple years. And that question is just a part of me now. Like, what is humanity's role on Earth right now at this very moment? And that started with being a part of Turtle Island Institute, which is an Indigenous teaching lodge and part of Waterloo University in Canada. And the Anishinaabe women would, in ceremony, go out, and they do this, go out every morning at first light and ask that very question of what is humanity's role right now between the Great Treaty between the Creator and Mother Earth, and it obliterates, everything else. And what has drawn me to this group right now is it seems like it's, I like Earth defining the boundaries. And if we're looking at water and the watersheds, and I, did a little research just on my own to, about Ohio, and we have 88 counties and 35 have parts of rivers and streams that flow and drain into Lake Erie, 35, which means we have then 55 other counties where the water flows into the Mississippi. And in terms of thought and shifting thought, I tell you, not many people think like that. We think of the state of Ohio, we see the lake, you know, so that it's so conceptual. So my question is, when I've been thinking about for a little while, is how do we help transform thought to see Earth first, right? And then work in that way. And kind of like and the beautiful description, Jonathan, that you put in the message of, you know, how the glaciers formed, you know, this unique part of the Earth. It reminds me of Thomas Berry, who was the first I heard of bioregions, and just looking at Earth first, which I think, you know, there's a potential to do that and help people see that. We don't see it because, well, I don't know why, but we can. So thank you.
Great, thank you. Victoria? You're muted still, Victoria.
Kimberly, I wanted to say I really appreciated your comments. Amazing. And why I raised my hand was when Jan said why, you know, people can't identify with a concept so big as the Great Lakes Basin. They really want to get involved locally. And I would absolutely say yes. The reason that we need the big idea is that someone located over here among people who have never heard of the word and don't care, where can I, because I've found this thing, who can I talk to? Oh, these people are part of the same, you know, bioregion. Maybe they will find the other people that are close to me because I don't know who they are. But if we all go to the large bioregion, eventually there will be subdivisions of ways of seeing the various regions that we all agree. And those regions will have their own, and you know, they just start like towns, things that they've always had, just focusing on bioregionalism and not just health issues and, you know, whatever, but that bioregionalism is something that everybody's learning and digging their teeth into in the community in all different ways of getting educated. So there's still a reason to have the big one.
Right. And at the same time, for each one of us, it's fundamentally about our story of place and where we stand and how the Earth speaks to us and what we're committed to. Preston? And then we're going to wrap up, I think, after that.
Why I'm here. Been watching this trajectory now for a couple of decades, and I think it's fascinating that we are talking about how to get enough people excited about doing that. That's not what's needed at all. We are walking into collapse. We don't see it yet because we've detached ourselves so much from the reality. India stopped shipping food earlier this year. China stopped shipping food earlier this year. I believe France potatoes don't exist this year. We have a few months worth of food stocks that are being depleted. We all know this here, but most of the world outside my door doesn't know that. This is about to start happening, whether it's 2023, whether it's 2024, I don't know. But the fact that there's these potentials of using existing knowledge, using existing tools of community that gets away from the antagonisms, the confrontations, all the problems that we are being distracted by within society now, the system has to be slightly built out and sitting there as a net. And those of us that are in this position have that opportunity to begin building that net. And so this will happen. Those of us that are on this journey have the potential of setting that up. Very much like Victoria was saying, you know, 50 years from now is going to be a very different world. Do you want to be a part of that journey to that different world and figuring out what all the details look like? Or do you want to go back to some little project that you're working on? that's my perspective on it. Thanks.
Great. Joe and Penny?
I just wanted to build on what Preston was saying, because he's absolutely right. If you look at, 100% of empires and civilizations have collapsed, and 0 of them woke up and realized it as it was happening. 0. So we can safely predict that the majority of people aren't going to get what's happening. And this is exactly why the focus on pro-social is so important. Building human relationships. Building human relationships that are place-based, getting to know our neighbors is extremely important. And one thing that I think that Victoria was saying is also important is we have geographically physical neighbors, like the person that lives across the street from me, and then we have semantically or narrative-based neighbors, which are people who see the world the way we do. And a lot of suicides happen because people feel alone in a crowd, not because they're physically alone. So that semantic relationship is extremely important. And those of you like Steve who've been around the bioregionalism movement for a while will know that it comes and goes, right? It comes and goes. I'm going to meet with David Hankey pretty soon. I think you know Dave, right? Who helped organize the Ozarks bioregional congresses in the 70s. He's still here in Missouri. I've never met him, but I know about the work they've done. And I'm very excited because here I am coming back to Missouri this week, thinking I'd written Missouri off. Like, no, I'm not going to move back to Missouri. I'm going to stay in Barichara, but I had written Missouri off. And I come back here with this bioregional lens, with the richness of my experience in the last few years, and talk about the land of riches in Southwest Missouri. All of these resilient, self-reliant people who can hunt, who can do construction, who can fix things with their hands, who are distrustful of outsiders, who have some pretty weird politics and some weird things related to fundamentalism and guns. But, they're going to watch out for their neighbors at the end of the day, because bioregionalism, not the word, the perspective of bioregionalism is very strong in the Ozarks. And if you come to the Ozarks, you find it's kind of a bubble. No one outside knows about the Ozarks, but people in the Ozarks know about the Ozarks. And so there's something about this part of it, which is finding the people in other landscapes. And we definitely found in Colorado that helping Carbondale and Paonia connect with each other, helping neighboring bioregions close enough for them to get together, and then offering the shared language of pro-social. And then also the shared language of the common land model and the shared language of integrated landscape and blah, 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 all that stuff that's really important. But the pro-social part, it's like people have no idea how to be in community. They don't know how to be in relationship. There's so much trauma healing that has to happen. So the pro-social part is like the most important part of this work, but it always embedded in place. That's the thing pro-social world is going to learn from us after we bang on their door enough times. I think most of you know that I'm good friends with Paul Atkins and David Sloan Wilson and all those guys. By the end of this year, they will realize that they have to reorganize everything they do around place. They're going to come to see that the land is our most important pro-social relationship. And that is so different from civilization and so different from modernity, but it's where real pro-social, like I took Penny to visit the creek that kept me from killing myself during my childhood. I had a pro-social relationship with a creek. And so just naming the significance of land and how invisible it is to most people, this is where the action's going to be. Pro-social relationships, story of place, and then connecting in the narrative realm that we're talking in the same way from one place to another. And it's just going to be super important. So I just wanted to tag on with that because I'm swimming in it at the moment.
Thank you. And I just want to acknowledge that we are officially at overtime, but I would invite you to stay on and speak what moves you as we wind down, and whatever you would like to say and leave as a conclusion, please come forward and do that. Steve?
I hope that will start to think about the pro-social locus of place can be eco-villages. And I've always had the idea that the networks of real existing eco-village communities can become the basis for the eventual, when you network them together, become the basis for the eventual bioregional reorganization of society. So I just want to put that in for us to think more along the lines of building eco-villages.
Do you want to pass it along to someone else, and we'll go around the circle again and get everyone's final words? Victoria?
I'm so glad you said that, Steve. Because it really does tie together. It's like the gap isn't so big. You know, we've actually, as a culture, kind of, people are less and less, I'm hearing, what's an eco village? You know, people are kind of getting the idea, and they're so a little curious. So the getting people to work together in that kind of community is essential for survival of the human race. And so put together with bioregionalism inside communities. And I think about our neighborhood, and Jonathan and I have been trying to kind of create some community spirit in our new neighborhood. And now, you know, like I started out saying, this is important to me, and I've forgotten why. And the why is that if we could do a good job at this, we won't be in as much trauma as the streets nearby if we actually physically do this for a purpose that is bigger than, you know, whatever they conceive of now as to why our 3 streets should be a little community. They, you know, nobody gets it. Like, oh yeah, we should have our names in a book, so if some disaster happens, I don't know. So that's how it lives for everybody now. But thank you for the perspective.
So, as I said, I really would like to have us go around the room and have everybody say, you know, 1 word or 2 words about what it is that they see. And I wanted to mention also that we have only scheduled 2 of these conversations, the next one at this time next week. And what I hope you'll all do is reach out to people that you know who ought to be here and invite them to come next week. And then we'll see if we have enough momentum and commitment to bring Joe and Penny and Benji here to talk with groups here. And if not, we're going to host you anyway. So why don't we just go around? Why don't we start with Preston? Because I'm going to go around the circle and on my screen.
Very excited to return back to a trajectory of human flourishing. And I will pass on to Han.
Would that be me? All right, thank you, Preston. It's always excitement at the beginning of the year. So energy is high. I want to kick the pedal to the metal with realistic expectations. But outreach, for me, it's all about outreach and identifying who is in this with me. And I'm very thankful for this group and everybody that, you know, in the wider network. But yeah, that is my outlook. I will just go to the next name. RJ.
Just the opportunity I'm feeling to appreciate the sacredness of fresh water and how important it is to us. And I have this memory of being out on Lake Erie in a sudden storm, which sometimes comes up, and being so scared that I was going to drown out there. It's such amazing power. And of course, we made it back. Okay, but just that, the ability to be around the wonder of the water and appreciate it together. And anyone, Kim?
So
I believe
muted.
you're on mute, Kim.
Yeah, I have a mouse problem. It took me that long to get my cursor across the screen. I'm sorry.
No problem.
I just check out with gratitude and just relationship, and we're always in relationship with everyone, everything, all the time. So just be aware of that. Thank you. I'm interested in the next meeting going forward.
Do you want to pass it on to someone?
Yes, thank you, Anna, please.
Thanks, Kim. I'm so glad you could make it. I'm also just very thankful to be on here with so many people so close to me, and actually people who have experienced Lake Erie, Lake Ontario, and who have this, who are close to where I live, because I have yet to actually be part of a regenerative discussion like this in my own home. It's always been more global. So I'm very excited to be talking to you all. And I will pass it on to Joe and Penny before your computer dies.
Yeah, I just say I'm feeling, I'm sensing an emergent coherence beginning. So I'm feeling excited. I'm feeling that.
Yeah, and after this morning, we visited 2 springs here in Neosho, Missouri, that feed one of the most important fish hatcheries. And you can just feel the fresh water seeping from the ground in this place. And I can just feel that water running into the same flows as the rest of the continent. So it's just beautiful. And we'll pass it to Chad.
Great, yeah. I was a little bummed about not being able to come down to Columbia to see Joe and Penny this season, but it looks like you guys have come up here. So yeah, I'm excited to see the good work come into the Great Lakes, and I'll see if I can make it out to the Toronto area in a few weeks there. So see if we can make that happen. And and that speaks to the connections of the semantic connections, the importance of story that transcends but connects place. So I think that's been an important observation too. And I have some folks here that I'll see if I can drum some interest and maybe get them on one of these calls. So looking forward to that. And I will pass it on to Todd.
Thanks, Ted. Just I think gratitude. It's been great to listen in, and growing up in Minnesota, I have an affinity for water and the life in it. So any stewardship body that we can develop, that's just great. It's wonderful. I'll pass it to Susan.
Thanks so much for letting me come. Now I realize I'm in a completely different bioregion, but the Ohio River Basin, but it butts up against the Great Lakes. I appreciate everything all of you are doing, and I appreciate this conversation. It's a much bigger framework than I have been thinking, but I have been thinking about the importance of, local connections, local food production, local energy, local. So anyway, this is great. I'm going to dive into some of these resources more, and who knows what we'll end up being able to develop. Brian?
Yes, once we have Joe and Penny's schedule for Toronto finalized, I will post it on Bioregional Activators and welcome any of you who are able to travel up to the area for one of the events. Great to see you in person. And just thinking a lot about helping people connect to place, helping people to connect to their local watershed, and then doing the scale linking and helping them connect to the Great Lakes bioregion and to the greater planetary bioregional network. And I'll pass it to Hillary.
I'm left with curiosity, and I'm left with the idea that in the old days, jigsaw puzzles, you used to cut, they used to come with a picture. And you would then put all the pieces together to create that picture. We don't do that anymore with these kinds of situations. We have the pieces and we're putting them together into a picture, and we don't quite know yet what that picture looks like or the story behind it, but we know we have all these very unique and beautiful pieces. So I'm curious to see what picture starts to emerge as we start to fit all these different pieces together.
Love it. Really appreciate it. Is there anyone else who would like to say anything before we say goodbye? And thank you so much. And we'll see you again next week if you can make it. And we'll send out a follow-up with the link to the video and to some of the resources that we quoted. Great. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Take care, everybody.
Yep. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much.